Our special guests at the top of the hour, we have Jimmy LaSalvia, co-founder and executive director of GOProud, Brian Silva, executive director of Marriage Equality USA, and Wisconsin Congressman Mark Pocan, the only openly gay married man serving in Congress. Gentlemen, it's great to have you all here. Brian, I want to start with you. The court's hearings are happening right now as we speak, but we've been seeing a big shift throughout the country in public opinion. The NBC Wall Street Journal poll numbers show this dramatic change in polling in favor of marriage equality since 2004. And as the court takes up Prop 8 today, the Defense of Marriage Act tomorrow, how might this public shift in sentiment influence the court's ruling?
Well, I think it's not only even just the numbers, but the fact that it's, in all 50 states, in red and blue states, and rural communities and progressive communities. It's Catholics, it's people everywhere. And I think that that's something that the court looks at. They look at what America thinks, and America is ready for marriage equality.
And the ruling will not come out until late June. But Jimmy, if we look at the attorneys involved in this case, the ones who are arguing on one side we have Chuck Cooper, who is representing the proponents. On the other side, we've got this master pairing of Ted Olson, who represents the plaintiffs along with David Boies. Donald Verrilli, also representing the U.S. Solicitor General's office. Olson and Boies arguing that Prop 8 should be struck down, just like another landmark ruling when we talk of 1967 and Loving versus Virginia, which overturned a state ban on interracial marriage. But 30 states, Jimmy, still have amendments banning marriage equality. What are all those states, what will they be watching for in today's arguments?
Well, I think that it's up to the Supreme Court justices, and they'll decide whether everyone should be treated equally under the law or not. I think that we've even seen, going back to the public opinion, polling in states that have bans on same-sex marriage, like Ohio, 53%. A poll yesterday showed that they favor reversing their ban on same-sex marriage. So we'll have a clearer lay of the land at the end of the summer after the ruling is clear, but beyond that, we'll just assess at that point.
Jimmy, though you say it's up to the justices, as we talk about cases history, today also marking the 10-year anniversary of a landmark case on gay rights, Lawrence v. Texas. Justice Kennedy in that one sided with gay rights, writing the majority opinion. He's also seen to be pivotal within this case now. Washington Post, quoting Kennedy, is saying in a recent interview, a democracy should not be dependent for its major decisions on what 9 unelected people from a narrow legal background have to say. I think that statement itself leaves legal scholars kind of scratching their heads. But if it comes down to picking between gay rights and state rights, what do you think Kennedy will do?
Yeah, I don't predict what any individual justice will do, but I think it's worthy to note that very few cases in the history of the court have affected so many Americans in such a personal way, and the justices are keenly aware of that. It's a very personal issue for every family in America, so I think that they're all keenly aware of that.
You make a great point about what is personal being political, and Brian, we have Chief Justice John Roberts, pivotal in any high court case, but adding to the drama of these two cases is the fact that his cousin will attend today's hearings. She's an open lesbian, close with her cousin, the Chief Justice, and he's been quoted as saying, or she's been quoted as saying, that she has faith in Justice Roberts. Brian, do you think that he's going to have an eye toward his legacy of his court? And do you think that Loving v. Virginia from 1967, that case legalizing interracial marriage, is going to loom largely over the arguments today?
Oh, I think the court is always looking at its legacy, and all of the justices are. And I think what's really interesting about, what you mentioned before is that it just goes to show that that personal connection that people have can have such an impact. We've moved the ball forward on marriage equality so far, and one of the things that keeps coming over and over again is people saying, I know someone who's gay or lesbian, I have a friend, I have a family member, I have a colleague, and that has pushed our movement so far forward, because it's very hard to deny rights to people who you work with and live with and are family with every single day.
Gentlemen, I want to ask you to stand by and bring into the discussion Wisconsin Congressman Mark Pocan. Sir, this fight is personal for you. You've been the victim, as I understand it, of gay bashing, which spurred you into activism. You're now one of 2 openly gay members of Congress from the state of Wisconsin, along with Senator Tammy Baldwin, and you and your partner married in Canada, but that marriage is not recognized back here in the state, certainly not in the state where you reside. So what does this fight mean for you personally, especially as professionally you walk the halls of Congress?
Sure. Well, anything that is about equal treatment is important to me, but it's especially important, obviously, because I'm living it. As someone who's been married for 6.5 years, we had to go to Canada to get married. And even in the halls of Congress, my spouse doesn't have a spouse ID, they have a designee ID. He's my designee in the eyes of Congress. And I think we need to move towards that full step of equality, and I think that's why it's so important what the courts are looking at right now, because equal treatment under the law is exactly what the two cases that they're going to be hearing today and tomorrow are about. And if we're going to have full equality for every citizen, we certainly have to have it in marriage.
Congressman, you were one of over 200 members of Congress to sign a brief calling for DOMA to be overturned. DOMA going to be heard tomorrow. A number of lawmakers have also voiced their support for marriage equality in recent days. This week alone, we have Senators Claire McCaskill, John Warner, Mark Begich coming out for it, in support of it. Yet only 2 Republicans in the House and 1 Republican in the Senate have done the same, despite the fact, though, that over 130 other Republicans, they've signed this amicus brief doing so. If the Supreme Court upholds Prop 8, do you think that takes the heat off the GOP on this issue?
No, because this is an issue where the public is so far ahead of where elected leaders are. We just saw 58% nationally, but if you look at that 18 to 29 demographic, 81% of people support marriage equality. The country is so far ahead of elected leaders. The fact that we have elected leaders now recognizing and talking about it is simply a statement that they're hearing from their constituents, that people want equal treatment under the law, and that my marriage is as valid as anyone else's marriage. And if we have that, we're really respecting the institution of marriage. I think that's the message that resonates, and I think you're going to see more and more Republicans, elected official Republicans, recognizing that, because certainly the public has.
You make a great point about the millennials being well ahead of other generations. Sir, I do want to ask you, there are elected leaders in D.C. who have public secrets. Basically, they are closeted gay and lesbian elected leaders. How dangerous are homophobic elected leaders who happen to be closeted? How dangerous are they to the equality process?
Well, yeah, I'm not so worried about who's dangerous. I'm worried about who wants to be inclusive. And as I talk to members from both sides of the aisle, and they get a chance to know me, and I'm new, I've been there 12 weeks, but when they find out that I'm married, happily married for 6.5 years, talk about what my marriage is like, which is so much like their marriage, I just want to find those new allies that want to work towards equal treatment. I'm not going to think about the negative or going backwards. I want to move forward, and the best thing I can do is reach out to both Democrats and Republicans who recognize that when they get a chance to know someone, my marriage isn't any different than theirs. In fact, we're together for 6.5 years. A lot of people, elected officials, don't have that long of a record. That it really is something of value. Society, it's good for society, and I think we're just trying to change the hearts and minds of those who really want to move towards full equality. And I think there's a lot more people who eventually will be doing that.
Gentlemen, thank you so much, Congressman Mark Pocan, Jimmy LaSalvia, and Brian Silva. I appreciate you joining me today.